Hey, I'm Remy, and most people at Lincoln High know me as the human Wi-Fi, which basically means I'm the guy everyone calls whenever the school network crashes or when someone manages to lock themselves out of their own device for the 10th time in a row. I'm naturally quiet. I tend to wear hoodies even when the weather makes absolutely no sense for it. And socially, I blend into the background so well that I often feel less like a main character in my own life and more like someone who accidentally spawned into the wrong scene entirely. But what nobody at school understands is that while everyone else is worrying about exams, prom themes, and everyday teenage drama, I am usually dealing with server migrations, system scaling, and large-scale infrastructure problems for Fortune 500 companies, because I happen to be the CEO of Apex Solutions. Yes, that Apex Solutions, the one quietly running high-level digital systems for corporations that would never believe a teenager is behind any of it. On paper, my life looks perfect, with a 4.0 GPA, no enemies, and a bank account that could probably buy my entire school twice over. But that stability only exists because I am extremely careful about one thing, which is making sure no one ever connects me to Apex Solutions in any way at all. And that is exactly why what happened next almost destroyed everything I had built. It started when my lead developer, Sarah, told me that we needed to expand the team because the workload was becoming too heavy to manage efficiently, and she suggested bringing in a junior intern who could handle basic tasks like data entry, email organization, and general low-level support work that did not require access to sensitive systems. Under normal circumstances, I would have personally reviewed every detail of any candidate myself. But that week, I was buried under 3 global deployments, a major security audit, and a client threatening to terminate a multi-million-dollar contract. So I made the mistake of trusting the shortlist she sent me without properly investigating it. The candidate's name was Phil Miller, and his profile described him as local, disciplined, and extremely organized. So I only skimmed through the file, approved the hire, and immediately moved on to more urgent problems without even looking at the attached photo. That was the exact moment everything began to go wrong. The next morning, I walked into school expecting a completely normal day, but the moment I stepped into the hallway, I saw Principal Miller standing near the main corridor, the same man everyone called the Iron Ruler because of how strict he was, to the point where students genuinely believed even breathing too loudly could earn detention. Yet something about him that morning felt completely different, because he was smiling in a way that looked almost unreal, like someone who had just won something life-changing. He was staring at his phone with intense focus and quietly muttering to himself about finally getting a real opportunity and proving people wrong. And then I heard one word that immediately made my entire body go cold, which was Apex. I did not even think for a second after hearing that. I immediately turned away, walked fast into an empty hallway, and pulled out my phone with shaking focus as I opened Slack, because there was no possible scenario that that name should have been coming out of his mouth in that context. That was when I saw the message that completely broke everything. It read, "Hello, Arthur. This is Phil Miller. I am excited to begin working at Apex Solutions." Phil Miller, Principal Miller, the same man who controlled half of my school's discipline system, was now inside my company. And even worse than that, he believed Arthur was a real corporate executive instead of an AI identity I was using to stay hidden, which meant that if he ever connected Arthur to me, even by accident, everything I had built would collapse instantly. Because at that point, it would no longer just be school trouble, but investigations, audits, and the complete destruction of Apex Solutions. The next few days became extremely difficult because I had to act completely normal at school while also managing Miller inside the company at the same time, all while trying to ensure he never became suspicious about anything unusual. However, I started noticing something strange about him almost immediately. Because at first, it was not obvious suspicion, but rather small patterns that began to repeat in a way that felt intentional, such as the exact timing of Arthur's replies, always matching moments when I was suddenly busy at school, like looking down at my phone, typing quickly, or stepping away to handle something. And although once or twice could be coincidence, it kept happening in a way that slowly formed a pattern. He must have been suspecting me. The real shift began when there was a network failure at school during class, and while everyone panicked, I fixed it in under a minute, which was too fast and too clean for something that should have taken longer. When I looked up afterward, I noticed that Miller was not reacting like everyone else, but instead watching me very carefully, as though he was noting something instead of simply responding to the situation. At Apex, things became even more complicated because Miller began asking increasingly precise questions about Arthur, not directly suspicious at first, but focused on details like why Arthur never appeared on video, why decisions were made almost instantly, and why responses always followed such structured logic. At first, it looked like professional curiosity, but it slowly became something deeper over time, like he was studying a system instead of just interacting with a person. One day, he even suggested reorganizing client files using unnecessary levels of detail, such as middle names and metadata structuring, which showed that he was intelligent but also overthinking every system he interacted with. So, I called him through Arthur and calmly told him to slow down and focus on assigned tasks, and he responded immediately, as if he had been waiting for direction. But what I did not realize at the time was that he had access to logs, transcripts, and call records, which meant he was no longer just listening to Arthur, but actively studying behavior patterns, timing consistency, and decision logic. Everything escalated when the annual excellence program was announced, which included multiple stages, such as the science fair and student demonstrations, all leading to a final gala attended by donors, investors, and alumni. Because of the scale of the event, I ended up acting as the technical lead, while students like Jax were assigned roles under disciplinary supervision after repeated violations, although he clearly treated it more like an opportunity than a punishment. Jax, however, was not acting randomly, because over time he had started noticing that something about me was unusual, particularly how systems reacted when I worked and how I seemed to understand technical problems too quickly. So, instead of confronting me directly, he began gathering leverage and eventually approached me privately, demanding influence over the judging system in exchange for silence. At the same time, Miller was also changing, but not suddenly, rather gradually, as he stopped acting purely as a strict principal and began observing everything more like someone trying to solve a complex pattern, connecting behavior, timing, and reactions, as if building a theory in his mind about how everything was linked together. On the night of the gala, everything almost collapsed. I was backstage managing systems while simultaneously handling a live server issue overseas. During that moment, Principal Miller walked onto the stage to give a speech, and everything seemed normal until his phone suddenly rang, and instead of ignoring it, he answered it out loud in front of everyone and asked for Arthur. That immediately froze me, because one wrong response could expose everything. I immediately triggered an emergency system interruption that caused his phone to blast a loud alert, forcing him to drop it as it slid across the stage toward Mr. Sterling, who calmly pushed it back without reacting. But I knew that moment had been dangerously close to exposure. After that incident, Miller stopped showing curiosity and instead became fully focused, observing everything with even more precision as he began connecting patterns faster than before. Then Science Fair Day came, and Jax finally made his move by plugging in a corrupted drive that triggered a virus across the entire school network, not out of chaos, but deliberately, to force a situation where I would have to reveal my abilities. As systems began collapsing and panic spread throughout the building, I realized I had no choice left. So I stepped forward and took direct control of the system without using Arthur as a mask. For the first time, I operated openly, using the same level of speed and precision I used at Apex, fixing everything in real time while everyone watched. That was when I heard a voice behind me say, "Arthur." When I turned around, I saw Miller looking directly at me, not at the screen. Because by then, he was no longer guessing, but instead recognizing the exact behavioral patterns he had been studying for weeks. The system was eventually recovered. Jax was removed from the program, and Mr. Sterling recognized the same decision-making style he had seen in Arthur for years, which confirmed everything without needing explanation. Although Miller did not expose me, it was clear that he now understood the truth, which is that if I fall, everything around me collapses with it, including his own opportunity. So, instead of exposing me, we reached a silent understanding that kept everything under control. Now, whenever I'm called to the principal's office, it is no longer for discipline, it is for discussions. Although, just when I thought things were finally stable, my new math teacher submitted an application for a senior role at Apex Solutions. Which means one thing very clearly: we are not done yet.